Good morning and welcome back to Storytime Classics Live. And we are continuing with Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, the novel. I can't tell you how excited I am to be reading that. I'm just kidding. Today we'll be continuing with The Count of Monte Cristo, Chapter 60, The Telegraph. Good morning, Stanley. How are you today? What is it? My cat. My cat's name, and I did not name her, but her name is Jane, and she is my co-host. So Jane, I know you're sitting there all pretty like, and this will probably, yeah, hi. So Jane, say hi. Okay, Jane is my co-host, and she will have commentary, no doubt, later in the piece. So that answers that. Your next question was, can you go over the Cavalcanti's role in this novel? Yes, I can. The Cavalcantis are imposters. They're being played by certain characters. One, an old man. Most importantly, the son, Andrea Cavalcanti, is being played by the bastard son of Villefort. And we are seeing a very intricate con game going on. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So I hope that answers a little bit, at least, of your question, Stanley. So let's just jump right back in to Chapter 60. The Telegraph. Again, if you've missed any previous installments of this story, you can go to Southwest Shakespeare's YouTube page and find all of the previous chapters of this epic story, and many more. So here we go. Hope everyone is having a great Tuesday. Hope everyone had a great weekend. I know I did. Quite lovely. Here we go with Chapter 60, The Telegraph. Monsieur and Madame de Villefort found on their return that the Count of Monte Cristo, who had come to visit them in their absence, had been ushered into the drawing-room and was still awaiting them there. Madame de Villefort, who had not yet sufficiently recovered from her late emotion to allow of her entertaining visitors so immediately, retired to her bedroom, while the procurer, who could better depend upon himself, proceeded at once to the salon. Although Monsieur de Villefort flattered himself that, to all outward view, he had completely masked the feelings which were passing in his mind, he did not know that the cloud was still lowering on his brow, so much so that the Count, whose smile was radiant, immediately noticed his somber and thoughtful air. "Ma foi," said Monte Cristo, after the first compliments were over, "what is the matter with you, Monsieur de Villefort? I have arrived at the moment when you were drawing up an indictment for a capital crime?" Villefort tried to smile. "No, Count," he replied. "I am the only victim in this case. It is I who lose my cause, and it is ill luck, obstinacy, and folly which have caused it to be decided against me." "To what do you refer?" said Monte Cristo, with well-feigned interest. "Have you really met with some great misfortune?" "Oh, no, monsieur," said Villefort, with a bitter smile. "It is only a loss of money, which I have sustained, nothing worth mentioning, I assure you." "True," said Monte Cristo. "The loss of a sum of money becomes almost immaterial with a fortune such as you possess, and to one of your philosophic spirit. It is not so much the loss of the money that vexes me," said Villefort, "though, after all, 900,000 francs are worth regretting. But I am the more annoyed with this fate, chance, or whatever you please to call the power which has destroyed my hopes and my fortune, and may blast the prospects of my child also. as it is all occasioned by an old man relapsed into second childhood. What do you say? Said the Count. 900,000 francs? Is it indeed a sum which might be regretted even by a philosopher? And who is the cause of all this annoyance? My father, as I told you. Monsieur Noirtier? But I thought you told me he had become entirely paralyzed and that all his faculties were completely destroyed. Yes, his bodily faculties, for he can neither move nor speak. Nevertheless, he thinks, acts, and wills in the manner I have described. I left him about 5 minutes ago, and he is now occupied in dictating his will to 2 notaries. But to do this, he must have spoken. He has done better than that. He has made himself understood. How is such a thing possible? By the help of his eyes, which are still full of life, and, as you perceive, possess the power of inflicting mortal injury. My dear, said Madame de Villefort, who had just entered the room, perhaps you exaggerate the evil. Good morning, madame, said the Count, bowing. Madame de Villefort acknowledged the salutation with one of her most gracious smiles. What is this that Monsieur de Villefort has been telling me? Demanded Monte Cristo, and what incomprehensible misfortune? Incomprehensible is not the word, interrupted the procurer, shrugging his shoulders. It is an old man's caprice. And is there no means of making him revoke his decision? Yes, said Madame de Villefort, and it is still entirely in the power of my husband to cause the will, which is now in prejudice of Valentine, to be altered in her favor. The Count, who perceived that Monsieur and Madame de Villefort were beginning to speak in parables, appeared to pay no attention to the conversation, and feigned to be busily engaged in watching Edward, who was mischievously pouring some ink into the bird's water glass. My dear, said Villefort in answer to his wife, you know I have never been accustomed to play the patriarch in my family, nor have I ever considered that the fate of a universe was to be decided by my nod. Nevertheless, it is necessary that my will should be respected in my family, and that the folly of an old man and the caprice of a child should not be allowed to overturn a project which I had entertained for so many years. The Baron d'Épinay was my friend, as you know, and an alliance with his son is the most suitable thing that could possibly be arranged. Do you think, said Madame de Villefort, that Valentine is in league with him? She has always been opposed to this marriage, and I could not be at all surprised if what we have just seen and heard is nothing but the execution of a plan concerted between them. Madame, said Villefort, believe me, a fortune of 900,000 francs is not so easily renounced. She could, nevertheless, make up her mind to renounce the world, sir, since it is only about a year ago that she herself proposed entering a convent. Never mind, replied Villefort. I say that this marriage shall be consummated. Notwithstanding your father's wishes to the contrary, said Madame de Villefort, selecting a new point of attack, that is a serious thing. Monte Cristo, who pretended not to be listening, heard, however, every word that was said. Madame, replied Villefort, I can truly say that I have always entertained a high respect for my father, because to the natural feeling of relationship was added to the consciousness of his moral superiority. The name of father is sacred in 2 senses. He should be reverenced as the author of our being and as a master whom we ought to obey. But under the present circumstances, I am justified in doubting the wisdom of an old man who, because he hated the father, vents his anger on the son. It would be ridiculous to me to regulate my conduct by such caprices. I shall still continue to preserve the same respect toward Monsieur Noirtier. I will suffer without complaint. Pecuniary deprivation to which he has subjected me, but I shall remain firm in my determination, and the world shall see which party his reason on his side. Consequently, I shall marry my daughter to the Baron Franz d'Épinay because I consider it would be proper and eligible match for her to make, and in short, because I choose to bestow my daughter's hand on whomever I please. What? Said the Count, the approbation of whose eye Villefort had frequently solicited during this speech. What? Do you say that Monsieur Noirtier disinherits Mademoiselle de Villefort because she is going to marry Monsieur le Baron Franz d'Épinay? Yes, sir, that is the reason, said Villefort, shrugging his shoulders. The apparent reason, at least, said Madame de Villefort. The real reason, madame, I can assure you, I know my father. But I want to know in what way, Monsieur d'Épinay, can I have displeased your father more than any other person? I believe I know Monsieur Franz d'Épinay, said the Count. Is he not the son of General de Quinzel, who was created Baron d'Épinay by Charles X? The same, said Villefort. Well, but he is a charming young man, according to my ideas. He is, which makes me believe that it is only an excuse of Monsieur Noirtier to prevent his granddaughter marrying. Old men are always so selfish in their affection, said Madame de Villefort. But, said Monte Cristo, do you not know any cause for this hatred? Ah, ma foi, who is to know? Perhaps it is some political difference. My father and the Baron d'Épinay lived in the stormy times of which I only saw the ending, said Villefort. Was not your father a Bonapartist? Asked Monte Cristo. I think I remember that you told me something of that kind. My father has been a Jacobean more than anything else, said Villefort, carried by his emotion beyond the bounds of prudence. And the senator's robe, which Napoleon cast on his shoulders, only served to disguise the old man without in any degree changing him. When my father conspired, it was not for the emperor. It was against the Bourbons, for Monsieur Noirtier possessed this peculiarity. He never projected any utopian schemes which could never be realized, but strove for possibilities, and he applied to the realization of these possibilities the terrible theories of the mountain, theories that never shrank from any means that were deemed necessary to bring about the desired result. Well, said Monte Cristo, it is just as I thought. It was politics which brought Noirtier and Monsieur d'Épinay into personal contact. Although General d'Épinay served under Napoleon, did he not still retain royalist sentiments? And was he not the person who was assassinated one evening on leaving a Bonapartist meeting to which he had been invited on the supposition that he favored the cause of the emperor? Villefort looked at the Count almost with terror. I am mistaken, then? Said Monte Cristo. No, sir. The facts were precisely what you have stated, said Madame de Villefort, and it was to prevent the renewal of old feuds that Monsieur de Villefort formed the idea of uniting in the bonds of affection the two children of these inveterate enemies. It was a sublime and charitable thought, said Monte Cristo, and the whole world should applaud it. It would be noble to see Mademoiselle Noirtier de Villefort assuming the title of Madame Franz d'Épinay. Villefort shuddered. And looked at Monte Cristo, as if he wished to read in his countenance the real feelings which had dictated the words he had just uttered. But the Count, completely baffled by the procureur, and prevented him from discovering anything beneath the never-varying smile he was so constantly in the habit of assuming. Although, said Villefort, it will be a serious thing for Valentine to lose her grandfather's fortune, I do not think that Monsieur d'Épinay will be frightened as this pecuniary loss. Say that 10 times fast. He will perhaps hold me in greater esteem than the money itself, seeing that I sacrifice everything in order to keep my word with him. Besides, he knows that Valentine is rich in right of her mother, and that she will, in all probability, inherit the fortune of Monsieur and Madame de Saint-Méran, her mother's parents, who both love her tenderly, and who are fully as well worth loving and tending as Monsieur Noirtier, said Madame de Villefort. Besides, they are to come to Paris in about a month, and Valentine, after the affront she has received, need not consider it necessary to continue to bury herself alive by being shut up with Monsieur Noirtier. The Count listened with satisfaction to this tale of wounded self-love and defeated ambition. But it seems to me, said Monte Cristo, and I must begin by asking your pardon for what I am about to say, that if Monsieur Noirtier disinherits Mademoiselle de Villefort because she is going to marry a man whose father he detested, he cannot have the same cause of complaint against this dear Edward. True, said Madame de Villefort, with an intonation of voice which is impossible to describe. Is it not unjust, shamefully unjust? Poor Edward is as much Monsieur Noirtier's grandchild as Valentine, and yet, if she had not been going to marry Monsieur Franz, Monsieur Noirtier would have left her all his money. And supposing Valentine to be disinherited by her grandfather, she will still be 3 times richer than he. The Count listened and said no more. Count, said Villefort, we will not entertain you any longer with our family misfortunes. It is true that my patrimony will go to endow charitable institutions, and my father will have deprived me of my lawful inheritance, without any reason for doing so. But I shall have the satisfaction of knowing that I have acted like a man of sense and feeling. Monsieur de Épinay, to whom I had promised the interest of this sum, shall receive it, even if I endure the most cruel of privations. However, said Madame de Villefort, returning to the one idea which incessantly occupied her mind, perhaps it would be better to explain this unlucky affair to Monsieur de Épinay, in order to give him the opportunity of himself renouncing his claim in the hand of Mademoiselle de Villefort. Ah, that would be a great pity, said Villefort. A great pity, said Monte Cristo. Undoubtedly, said Villefort, moderating the tones of his voice, a marriage once concerted and then broken off throws a sort of discredit on a young lady. Then again, the old reports which I was so anxious to put an end to will instantly gain ground. No, it will all go well. Monsieur d'Épinay, if he is an honorable man, will consider himself more than ever pledged to Mademoiselle de Villefort, unless he were actuated by a decided feeling of avarice. But that is impossible. I agree with Monsieur de Villefort, said Monte Cristo, fixing his eyes on Madame de Villefort, and if I were sufficiently intimate with him to allow of giving my advice, I would persuade him, since I have been told Monsieur d'Épinay is coming back, to settle this affair at once beyond all possibility of revocation. I will answer for the success of a project which will reflect so much honor on Monsieur de Villefort. The procurer arose, delighted with the proposition, but his wife slightly changed color. Well, that is all that I wanted, and I will be guided by a counselor such as you are, said he, extending his hand to Monte Cristo. Therefore let everyone here look upon what has passed today as if it had not happened, and as although we had never thought of such a thing as a change in our original plans. Sir, said the Count, the world, unjust as it is, will be pleased with your resolution, Your friends will be proud of you, and Monsieur d'Épinay, even if he took Mademoiselle de Villefort without any dowry, which he will not do, would be delighted with the idea of entering a family which could make such sacrifices in order to keep a promise and fulfill a duty." At the conclusion of these words, the Count rose to depart. "Are you going to leave us, Count?" said Madame de Villefort. "I am sorry to say I must do so, madam. I only came to remind you of your promise for Saturday." "Do you fear that we should forget it?" "You are very good, madam, but Monsieur de Villefort has so many important and urgent occupations." "My husband has given me his word, sir," said Madame de Villefort. "You have just seen him resolved to keep it when he has everything to lose, and surely there is more reason for his doing so where he has everything to gain." "And," said Villefort, "is it at your house in the Champs-Élysées that you receive your visitors?" "No," said Monte Cristo, "which is precisely the reason which renders your kindness more meritorious. It is in the country." "In the country?" "Yes." "Where is it, then? Near Paris, is it not?" "Very near. Only half a league from the barriers." "It is at Auteuil." "At Auteuil," said Villefort. "True. Madame de Villefort told me you lived at Auteuil, since it was to your house that she was taken. And in what part of Auteuil do you reside?" "Rue de la Fontaine." "Rue de la Fontaine!" exclaimed Villefort in an agitated tone. "At what number?" "Number 28. "Then," cried Villefort, "was it you who brought Monsieur de Saint-Méran's house? You who bought Monsieur de Saint-Méran's house?" "Did it belong to Monsieur de Saint-Méran?" demanded Monte Cristo. "Yes," replied Madame de Villefort, "and would you believe it, Count?" "Believe what?" "You think this house pretty, do you not?" "I think it is charming." "Well, my husband will never live in it." "Indeed," returned Monte Cristo, "that is a prejudice on your part, Monsieur de Villefort, for which I am quite at loss to account." "I do not like Auteuil, sir," said the procureur, making an effort to appear calm. "But I hope you will not carry your antipathy so far as to deprive me of the pleasure of your company, sir," said Monte Cristo. "No, Count. I assure you, I shall do my best," stammered Villefort. "Oh," said Monte Cristo, "I allow of no excuse. On Saturday at 6 o'clock, I shall be expecting you, and if you fail to come, I shall think, for how do I know, too, on the contrary, that this house, which has remained uninhabited for 20 years, must have some gloomy tradition or dreadful legend connected with it." "I will come, Count. I will be sure to come," said Villefort eagerly. "Thank you," said Monte Cristo. "Now you must permit me to take my leave of you." "You said before that you were obliged to leave us, monsieur," said Madame de Villefort, "and you were about to tell us why when your attention was called to some other subject." "Indeed, madame," said Monte Cristo, "I scarcely know if I dare tell you where I'm going." "Nonsense. Say on." "Well, then, it is to see a thing on which I have sometimes mused for hours together." "What is it?" "A telegraph. So now I have told you my secret." "A telegraph?" repeated Madame de Villefort. "Yes, a telegraph. I had often seen one placed at the end of a road on a hillock, and in the light of the sun its black arms, bending in every direction, always reminded me of the claws of an immense beetle. And I assure you it was never without emotion that I gazed on it, for I could not help thinking how wonderful it was that these various signs should be made to cleave the air with such precision as to convey the distance of 300 leagues, the ideas and wishes of a man sitting at a table at one end of the line to another man sitting at a table to another man similarly placed at the opposite extremity, and all this effected by a simple act of volition on the part of the sender of the message. I began to think of genii, sylphs, gnomes, in short, of all the ministers of the occult sciences, until I laughed aloud at the freaks of my own imagination. Now it never occurred to me to wish for a nearer inspection of these large insects with their long black claws, for I always feared to find under their stone wings some little human genius fagged to death with cabals, factions, and government intrigues. But one fine day I learned that the mover of this telegraph was only a poor wretch hired for 1,200 francs a year, and employed all day not in studying the heavens like an astronomer, or in gazing on the water like an angler, or even in enjoying the privilege of observing the country around him. But all his monotonous life was passed in watching his white-bellied, black-clawed fellow insect for 4 or 5 leagues distant from him. At length, I felt a desire to study this living chrysalis more closely, and to endeavor to understand the secret part played by these insect actors when they occupy themselves simply with pulling different pieces of string. And are you going there? I am. What telegraph do you intend visiting? That of the Home Department or of the observatory? Oh, no. I should find there people who would force me to understand things of which I would prefer to remain ignorant, and who would try to explain to me, in spite of myself, a mystery which even they do not understand. Ma foi, I should wish to keep my illusions concerning insects unimpaired. It is quite enough to have those dissipated which I had formed of my fellow creatures. I shall therefore not visit either of these telegraphs, but one in the open country, where I shall find a good-natured simpleton who knows no more than the machine he is employed to work. You are a singular man, said Villefort. What line would you advise me study? The one that is most in use just at this time. The Spanish one, you mean, I suppose? Yes. Should you like a letter to the minister that they might explain to you? No, said Monte Cristo, since, as I told you before, I do not wish to comprehend it. The moment I understand it, there will no longer exist a telegraph for me. It will be nothing more than a sign from Monsieur Doctel, or from Monsieur Montalivet, transmitted to the perfect prefect of Bayonne, mystified by 2 Greek words, tele, graphein. It is the insect with black claws. And the awful word which I wish to retain in my imagination in all its purity and all its importance. Go then, for in the course of 2 hours it will be dark, and you will not be able to see anything. Ma foi, you frighten me. Which is the nearest way? Bayonne? Yes, the road to Bayonne. And afterwards the road to Châtillon? Yes. By the tower of Monthulé? You mean? Yes. Thank you. Goodbye. On Saturday I will tell you my impressions concerning the telegraph. At the door, the Count was met by 2 notaries, who had just completed the act which was to disinherit Valentine, and who were leaving under the conviction of having done a thing which could not fail of redounding considerably to their credit. Chapter 61. How a Gardener May Get Rid of the Dormice That Eat His Peaches. Chapter 61. Not on the same night as he had intended, but the next morning, the Count of Monte Cristo went out by the Barrière d'Enfer, taking the road to Orleans, leaving the village of Linus, without stopping at the telegraph, which flourished its great bony arms as he passed. The Count reached the tower of Montreuil, situated, as everyone knows, upon the highest point of the plain of that name. At the foot of the hill, the Count dismounted and began to ascend by a little winding path, about 18 inches wide. When he reached the summit, he found himself stopped by a hedge, upon which green fruit had succeeded to red and white flowers. Monte Cristo looked for the entrance to the enclosure and was not long in finding a little wooden gate, working on willow hinges and fastened with a nail and string. The Count soon mastered the mechanism. The gate opened, and he found himself in a little garden about 20 feet long by 12 wide, bounded on one side by part of the hedge, which contained the ingenious contrivance we have called a gate, and on the other by the old tower, covered with ivy and studded with wallflowers. No one would have thought in looking at this old, weather-beaten, floral-decked tower, which might be likened to an elderly dame dressed up to receive her grandchildren at a birthday feast, that would have been capable of telling strange things if, in addition to the menacing ears which the proverb says all walls are provided with, it had also a voice. The garden was crossed by a path of red gravel, edged by a border of thick box of many years' growth, and of a tone and of a color that would have delighted the heart of Delacroix, our modern Rubens. Delacroix. I know I've heard this name before, and I've pronounced it before. Yeah, we're just going to leave it at that. Our modern Rubens. This path has formed in the shape of the figure of 8, thus, in its windings, making a walk of 60 feet in a garden of only 20. Never had Flora, the fresh and smiling goddess of gardeners, been honored with a pure or more scrupulous worship than that which was paid to her in this little enclosure. In fact, of the 20 rose trees which formed the parterre, not one bore the mark of the slug, nor were there evidences anywhere of the clustering aphis, which is so destructive to plants growing in a damp soil. And yet, it was not because the damp had been excluded from the garden. The earth was black as soot. The thick foliage of the trees betrayed its presence. Besides, had naturally humidity been wanting, it could have been immediately supplied by artificial means, thanks to a tank of water sunk in one of the corners of the garden, and upon which were stationed a frog and a toad, who, from antipathy, no doubt, always remained on the two opposite sides of the basin. There was not a blade of grass to be seen in the paths, or a weed in the flower beds. No fine lady ever trained and watered her geraniums, her cacti, and her rhododendrons with more pains than this hitherto unseen gardener bestowed upon his little enclosure. Monte Cristo stopped after having closed the gate and fastened the string to the nail, and cast a look around. "The man at the telegraph," said he, "must either engage a gardener or devote himself passionately to agriculture." Suddenly he struck against something crouching behind a wheelbarrow filled with leaves. The something rose, uttering an exclamation of astonishment, and Monte Cristo found himself facing a man about 50 years old, who was plucking strawberries, which he was placing upon grape leaves. He had 12 leaves and about as many strawberries, which, on rising suddenly, he let fall from his hand. "You are gathering your crop, sir," said Monte Cristo, smiling. "Excuse me, sir," replied the man, raising his hand to his cap. I am not up there, I know, but I have only just come down." "Do not let me interfere with you in anything, my friend," said the Count. "Gather your strawberries, if indeed there are any left." "I have 10 left," said the man, "for here are 11, and I had 21, 5 more than last year. But I am not surprised. The spring has been warm this year, and strawberries require heat, sir. It is the reason that instead of the 16 I had last year, I have this year, you see, 11 already plucked. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I miss 3. They were here last night, sir. I am sure they were. I counted them. It must be the mere Simon's son who has stolen them. I saw him strolling about here this morning. Ah, the young rascal, stealing in a garden. He does not know where that may lead him to." "Certainly it is wrong," said Monte Cristo, "but you should take into consideration the youth and greediness of the delinquent." "Of course," said the gardener, "but that does not make it the less unpleasant. But, sir, once more I beg pardon. Perhaps you are an officer that I am detaining here," and he glanced timidly at the Count's blue coat. "Calm yourself, my friend," said the Count, with the smile which he made at will either terrible or benevolent, and which now expressed only the kindest feeling. "I am not an inspector, but a traveler, brought here by a curiosity he half repents of, since he causes you to lose your time." "Ah, my time is not valuable," replied the man with a melancholy smile. "Still, it belongs to government, and I ought not to waste it. But having received the signal that I might rest for an hour," here he glanced at the sundial, for there was everything in the enclosure of Monterey, even a sundial, "and having 10 minutes before me, and my strawberries being ripe, when a day longer, by the by, sir, do you think dormice eat them?" "Indeed, I should think not," replied Monte Cristo. "Dormice are bad neighbors for us who do not eat them preserved as the Romans did." "What? Did the Romans eat them?" said the gardener. "Ate dormice?" "I have read so in Petronius," said the Count. "Really? They can't be nice, though they do say, as fat as a dormouse. It is not a wonder they are fat, sleeping all day and only waking to eat all night. Listen, last year I had 4 apricots. They stole 1. I had 1 nectarine, only 1. Well, sir, they ate half of it on the wall, and splendid nectarine, I never ate a better." "You ate it? That is to say, the half that was left, you understand?" "It was exquisite, sir. Ah, those gentlemen never choose the worst morsels, like Mere Simon's son, who has not chosen the worst strawberries. But this year," continued the horticulturist, "I'll take care it shall not happen, even if I should be forced to sit by the whole night to watch when the strawberries are ripe." Monte Cristo had seen enough. Every man was a devouring passion in his heart. As every fruit has its worm, and that of the telegraph, man was horticulture. He began gathering the grape leaves which screened the sun from the grapes, and won the heart of the gardener. Did you come here, sir, to see the telegraph?" he said. "Yes, if it isn't contrary to the rules." "Oh, no," said the gardener, "not in the least, since there is no danger that anyone can possibly understand what we are saying." "I have been told," said the Count, "that you do not always yourselves understand the signals you repeat." "That is true, sir, and that is what I like best," said the man, smiling. "What do you like best?" "Why do you like that best?" "Because then I have no responsibility. I am a machine then, and nothing else. And so long as I work, nothing more is required of me." "Is it possible," said Monte Cristo to himself, "that I can have to meet with a man that has no ambition, that would spoil my plans?" "Sir," said the gardener, glancing at the sundial, "the 10 minutes are almost up. I must return to my post. Will you go up with me?" I follow you." Monte Cristo entered the tower, which was divided into 3 stories. The tower contained implements such as spades, rakes, watering pots, hung against the wall. This was all the furniture. The second was the man's conventional abode, or rather sleeping place. It contained a few poor articles of household furniture, a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a stone pitcher, and some dry herbs hung up to the ceiling, which the Count recognized as sweet peas, and of which the good man was preserving the seeds. He had labeled them with as much care as if he had been master botanist in the Jardin des Plantes. "Does it require much study to learn the art of telegraphing?" asked Monte Cristo. "The study does not take long. It was acting as a supernumerary that was so tedious." "And what's the pay?" 1,000 francs, sir." "It is nothing." "No, but then we are lodged, as you perceive." Monte Cristo looked at the room. They passed to the 3rd story. It was the telegraph room. Monte Cristo looked in turn at the 2 iron handles by which the machine was worked. "It is very interesting," he said, "but it must be very tedious for a lifetime." "Yes. At first my neck was cramped with looking at it, but at the end of a year I became used to it. And then we have our hours of recreation and our holidays." "Holidays?" "Yes." "When?" "When we have a fog." "Ah, to be sure. Those are indeed holidays to me. I go into the garden. I plant, I prune, I trim, I kill the insects all day long." "How long have you been here?" 10 years, and 5 as a supernumerary make 15. "You are 55 years old. How long must you have served to claim the pension?" "Oh, sir, 25 years." "And how much is the pension?" 100 crowns. "Poor humanity," murmured Monte Cristo. "What did you say, sir?" asked the man. "I was saying it was very interesting." "What was?" "All you were showing me." "And you really understood none of these signals?" "None at all." "And have you never tried to understand them?" "Never. Why should I?" "But still there are some signals only addressed to you." "Certainly." "And do you understand them?" "They are always the same." "And they mean?" "Nothing new." "You have an hour, or tomorrow." "This is simple enough," said the Count. "But look, is not your correspondent putting itself in motion?" "Ah, yes, thank you, sir." "And what is it saying? Anything you understand?" "Yes. It asks if I am ready." "And you reply?" "By the same sign, which at the same time tells my right-hand correspondent that I am ready, while it gives notice to my left-hand correspondent to prepare in its return." "It is very ingenious," said the Count. "You will see," said the man profoundly. "In 5 minutes he will speak." "I have then 5 minutes," said Monte Cristo to himself. "It is more time than I require. My dear sir, will you allow me to ask you a question?" "What is it, sir?" "You are fond of gardening?" "Passionately." "And you would be pleased to have, instead of this terrace of 20 feet, an enclosure of 2 acres?" "Sir, I should make a terrestrial paradise of it." "You live badly on your 1,000 francs." "Badly enough, but yet I do live." "Yes, but you have a wretchedly small garden." "True. The garden is not large. And then, such as it is filled with dormice, who eat anything." "Ah, they are my scourges." "Tell me, would you have the misfortune to turn your head while your right-hand correspondent was telegraphing?" "I should not see him." "Then what would happen?" "I would not repeat the signals." "And then, not having repeated them, through negligence, I should be fined." "How much?" 100 francs. The 10th of your income. That would be fine. That would be fine work. Ah, said the man. Has it ever happened to you? Said Monte Cristo. Once, sir, when I was grafting a rose tree. Well, suppose you were to alter a signal and substitute another. Ah, in that case, I should be turned off and lose my pension. 300 francs? 100 crowns, yes, sir. So you see that I am not likely to do any of these things. Not even for 15 years' wages? Come, it is worth thinking about. For 15,000 francs? Yes. Sir, you alarm me. Nonsense. Sir, Sir, you are tempting me. Just so, 15,000 francs, do you understand? Sir, let me see my right-hand correspondent. On the contrary, do not look at him, but at this. What is it? What? Do you not know these bits of paper? Banknotes. Exactly. There are 15 of them. And whose are they? Yours, if you like. Mine? Exclaimed the man, half suffocated. Yes, yours. Your own property. Sir, my right-hand correspondent is signaling. Let him signal. Sir, you have distracted me. I shall be fined. That will cost you 100 francs. You see, it is your interest to take my banknotes. Sir, my right-hand correspondent redoubles his signals. He is impatient. Never mind, take these. And the Count placed the packet in the man's hands. Now this is not at all, he said. You cannot live upon your 15,000 francs. I shall still have my place. No, you will lose it, for you are going to alter your correspondence message. Oh, sir, what are you proposing? A jest. Sir, unless you force me, I think I can effectually force you, said Monte Cristo. I think I can effectually force you. And Monte Cristo drew another packet from his pocket. Here are 10,000 more francs, he said, with the 15,000 already in your pocket. They will make 25,000. With 5,000, you can buy a pretty little house with 2 acres of land. The remaining 20,000 will bring you in 1,000 francs a year. A garden with 2 acres of land and 1,000 francs a year. Oh, heavens! Come, take them. And Monte Cristo forced the banknotes into his hand. What am I to do? Nothing very difficult. But what is it? To repeat these signs. Monte Cristo took a paper from his pocket, upon which were drawn 3 signs, with numbers to indicate the order in which they were to be worked. There. You see, it will not take long. Yes, but do this, and you will have nectarines and all the rest. The shot told, red with fever. While the large drops fell from his brow, the man executed one after the other the 3 signs given by the Count, in spite of the frightful contortions of the right-hand correspondent, who, not understanding the change, began to think the gardener had gone mad. As to the left-hand one, he conscientiously repeated the same signals, which were finally transmitted to the Minister of the Interior. Now you are rich, said Monte Cristo. Yes, replied the man, but at what a price? Listen, friend, said Monte Cristo, I do not wish to cause you any remorse. Believe me, then, when I swear to you that you have wronged no man, but on the contrary have benefited mankind. The man looked at the banknotes, felt them, counted them, turned pale, then red, then rushed into his room to drink a glass of water, but he had no time to reach the water jug, and fainted in the midst of his dried herbs. 5 minutes after the new telegram reached the minister, Debray had the horses put to his carriage and drove to Danglars' house. Has your husband any Spanish bonds? He asked of the Baroness. I think so, indeed. He has 6 millions worth. He must sell them at whatever price. Why? Because Don Carlos has fled from Bourges. Okay. And has returned to Spain. How do you know? Debray shrugged his shoulders. The idea of asking how I hear the news, he said. The Baroness did not wait for a repetition. She ran to her husband, who immediately hastened to his agent and ordered him to sell at any price. When it was seen that Danglars sold, the Spanish funds fell directly. Danglars lost 500,000 francs, but he rid himself of all his Spanish shares. The same evening, the following was read in La Messenger. By telegraph, the king, Don Carlos, has escaped the vigilance of his guardians at Bourges. And has returned to Spain by the Catalonian frontier. Barcelona has risen in his favor. All that evening nothing was spoken of but the foresight of Danglars, who had sold his treasure, sold his shares, and of the luck of the stock jobber, who only lost 500,000 francs by such a blow. Those who had kept their shares or bought those of Danglars looked upon themselves as ruined and passed a very bad night. Next morning, Le Moniteur contained the following. It was without any foundation that Le Messenger yesterday announced the flight of Don Carlos and the revolt of Barcelona. The king, Don Carlos, has not left Bourges, and the peninsula is in the enjoyment of profound peace. A telegraphic signal, improperly interpreted, owing to the fog, was the cause of this error. The funds rose 1% higher than before they had fallen. This, reckoning his loss and what he had missed gaining, made the difference of 1,000,000 to Danglars. Good, said Monte Cristo to Morrel, who was at his house when the news arrived of the strange reverse of fortune of which Danglars had been the victim. I have just made a discovery for 25,000 francs, for which I would have paid 100,000. What have you discovered? Asked Morrel. I have just discovered how a gardener may get rid of the dormice that eat his peaches. And we will stop there today, and we will resume next time, Thursday, with chapter 62, entitled Ghosts. All right. We'll catch you next time on Storytime Classics Live. Hope you have a great rest of your day.